Urban Redevelopment Agency meeting to order. Will the recorder please call the roll?
Councillor Duggar.
I'm here.
Chair Hartmeyer-Prigg.
Here.
Councillor Hassan.
Here.
Councillor Kimmy.
Here.
Councillor Teeter.
Here.
Councillor Tivnon.
Here.
And Board Director Lair.
Here.
And I have Kim Walton Olven as absent, and did I also hear Mayor Beatty as absent? Okay,
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so first on our agenda is visitor comments. Visitor comments allow visitors to speak to the Bureau Board about matters not included on tonight's agenda or on tonight's agenda, right? It can be anything. Recording Secretary, do we have anyone here to address the Bureau Board?
It looks like we do have someone. I'm not sure if they're here for public comment, but I will give them the opportunity to talk.
All right, let's check. Thank you so much. So, Alicia, are you here for public comment tonight?
Let's see, unmute. I am here for public comment tonight.
Okay, one moment. Let me give my little spiel, and then I'm going to kick it over to you.
Sounds great.
Okay, so comments, since Alicia's our only one, we're going to leave that timer at 3 minutes. Comments are limited to 3 minutes for each person. Videos are not turned on for this portion of the meeting, and visitor microphones are muted throughout the meeting with the exception of your allotted time. Visitors may state your comments and should not expect your members to engage in back and forth dialogue regarding the comments. So, Alicia, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm not going to take all 3 minutes. Thank you all for all the work you do. We greatly appreciate it. I was looking through the 5-year proposed kind of plan, and I saw possibly a total of $2 million designated to the commons. And that concerned me because I was at the last work session that City Council had on the commons, and I didn't hear the desire to necessarily put that much money into it, even in a long-term process. I thought what I heard was a desire for more study on it. So I was just a little concerned about that $2 million figure. And I understand it's just a 5-year proposal, but it does give some people cause for alarm. So I thought I would just share that. And thanks for listening to me.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Alicia. Is there anyone else for public comment this evening?
No, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so next up we have board communications. Do any board members have any information they would like to share with the rest of the board and the interim executive director? Please either put your name in the chat or raise your hand if you would like to speak. Okay, seeing none. We do not have any minutes for consideration tonight, but we do have a consent agenda. The 3 items on our consent agenda tonight are Bureau Bill 2024-72, Bureau Acceptance of Metro 2040 Planning and Development Grant for Cycle 11 and the IGA. 2024-73, Resolution number 2024-063, the Appropriation for Metro 2040 Planning and Development Grant, and 2024-74, Bureau Annual Financial Statement and Financial Report for Fiscal 23. Do I have a motion for these 3 consent items?
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Thank you. Thank you. It has been moved by Councillor Hassan and seconded by Councillor Tivnon that we approve the consent agenda. Are there any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, will the recorder please call the roll vote?
Board Director Lair.
Yes.
Thank you. Board Director Tivnon.
Yes.
Teeter.
Yes.
Kimmy.
Yes.
Hassan.
Yes.
Hartmeyer-Prigg.
Yes.
And Duggar.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll now move on over to the business portion of our agenda tonight. We have 2 presentations. First, it is the Bureau Bill 2024-75, the Urban Renewal Advisory Committee 2023 Advisory Report. Each year, the Bureau Board is pleased to meet and hear from the Urban Renewal Advisory Committee. And tonight we will have the 2023 advisory report from last year's UREC Chair, Paige Lerwick. Paige, welcome. And thank you so much for not only being with us tonight, but also for your leadership this past year on the committee. We truly appreciate the committee's work, your excitement and guidance that you give the various projects and programs, and the work that's been happening in the district. So, Paige, the floor is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Ashley. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get everything set up to share my presentation. So just give me one moment, please. I apologize. Full screen. Okay. So the obligatory, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you all so much for having me tonight. As you mentioned, my name is Paige Lerwick. I am the outgoing chair of the Urban Renewal Advisory Committee. I have had the pleasure of working on the committee and advising for the past 4 years, beginning my 5th year here on the committee, which is hard to believe, but it's been an excellent experience, and certainly have learned a great deal being on the committee, and have, like I said, definitely feel privileged to be able to do so and to advise the work that you all are doing on the Bureau board. So I have structured my presentation today as really a recap and discussion of various projects and efforts that we've addressed over the year. So I'll just kind of kick it off here. All right, so first on the list here, the first presentation that we received to kick off the year with UREC was in regards to transportation and downtown access. So we were joined by Jean Seneschal Biggs to give us an update on everyone's favorite topic, which is the loop. So we all know that this is a major undertaking and will require really a great deal of community input, strategic decision making. And additionally, we know that it will quite literally redefine the experience of downtown Beaverton. So to that end, we really look forward to advising on this project and keeping abreast of developments as the years go on. So that's really what we were looking for, and what we got from Jean here was really an update of the work that had been going on and how the advice and input that we had given in prior sessions has been taken into account. So additionally, we heard from Jessica Engelman regarding the transportation system plan and the project to update that 20-year plan. So really both of these projects have the potential to drastically change and improve the way that we interact with and experience downtown Beaverton. So very great way to start off the year. Next here we have, oh, I'm sorry, is my, there, oh, it's a little bit delayed. Apologize for that. So although we certainly are going to encourage folks to use alternative transportation methods and continue to invest in that, I think it's imperative to recognize that people will still drive. So as such, we discussed our experiences with parking and heard more and more about parking compliance efforts that were at the time being piloted and that are currently underway. And so I can speak as someone who has received one of those parking compliance warnings and has made sure not to park over 2 hours again, that it is certainly working. They're doing a great job at that. So next up is business support and development. And so here we learned about the various programs available to support and attract businesses to downtown Beaverton, including the new streamlined business or building improvement program, which combined the two programs that previously existed and really presented that or made that more understandable and more efficient program. So we were able to provide direct input on the new application for that business or the building improvement program, which is really a great use of staff time and UREC time, in which we were able to really kind of focus on specific questions and a specific need for UREC's perspective from various community members that make up our group, and where they see the gaps in that application and where it might be discouraging to some community members or might present barriers to some. So that was really a great work session, able to, like I said, provide our impact and build out something that we think is going to attract small business owners or others to downtown Beaverton. Next up, we have the Bureau portfolio and redevelopment strategy. So sadly, I was personally not able to attend this session, but the feedback that I heard was that it was one of the most engaging sessions that we did have. And we heard from Janine and the team from Cascadia Partners. They gave an overview of the project, the work in progress, the timeline, and really sought URAC's feedback for the Bureau strategy and outreach efforts when it comes to the portfolio and the redevelopment strategy in regards to those properties that Bureau owns. So clearly, the Bureau portfolio and the projects that stem from them are critical to achieving the community goals and outcomes that we strive for. And again, this is a very long-term initiative that we look forward to working in tandem with or in support of the Bureau board for quite some time on these various sites. So next up is the downtown parks and open spaces. So from a personal perspective, as a parent of a small child, this is very near and dear to my heart. But obviously, children and families are not the only ones that are going to benefit from parks and open spaces. These spaces are critical to a happy and healthy life, and plus they, obviously they're going to activate the downtown urban area and give it identity and places of respite in an urban core. So I'm personally thrilled to see that the city's investing resources to ensure their availability. And so during this session, we had a great opportunity and discussion about our favorite parks in downtown Beaverton and outside of Beaverton too, about what makes these parks successful, why we love them so much, and also where they might be lacking, what we could do better, what are we looking for in Beaverton, how can we activate small spaces and really get the most out of the space that exists. And create a healthy, like I said, thriving downtown center for ourselves and for the future generations. All right. So we had a presentation on the Milliken Way expansion project, another project that has an incredible opportunity to redefine and kind of bring together the vision of downtown Beaverton. So. Yeah, so Dan Turk came into the office and to the chambers, as it were, to present on the different design options, as well as the pros and cons, specifically, the possible chance of displacement or that may come from some of these designs that have been presented in regards to Milliken Way. So it's once again a great opportunity for us to kind of see where we're at the building blocks, give our input on these various design options. So this photo that you're seeing here on the slide actually comes from our walking tour, in which we were able to, and you can see here that Dan joined us on that. This came, I think it was literally the following session to our Milliken Way discussion, in which we were able to actually walk through the site and understand hands-on, and see exactly what we're talking about, not just in theory, but in practice, where this possible displacement could happen and what the options are. And honestly, this is where some of our more lively conversations, came up, but it was a very, very productive conversation. And those are the conversations that we want to be having and making sure that everyone's voice is being heard and their real concerns. So, like I mentioned briefly in the previous slide, we have our URAC walking tour. So this is one of the highlights of the year for sure. The walking tour gives us an opportunity to actually get out, like I said, and walk through the projects that we are spending all this time talking about in Zoom sessions or in the council chambers. And really see hands-on the impact that these projects could have. So we started our walking tour. You can see the map here where we started and ended. So we had the opportunity to go through or start at the Reeser, kind of go through the creek, we saw the majority of the sites that are owned by Bureau right now. What else? We obviously went through Milliken Way. and then down through Broadway to see some of the work being done in terms of the building improvement grants and the preservation of the Fisher Rossi building, as well as understand, once again, the reality of the loop. We had Jean join us on the walking tour as well. So a great opportunity to connect the dots from these presentations into real life and hear again from some of the folks that we've already heard from and any possible updates that they may have had. So certainly something that is open to anyone to join. So if anyone is interested next year, just let Tyler know. We will gladly have you join us on our walking tour. And so towards the end of the year, we had a session regarding the Beaverton year-round shelter. This was a very engaging conversation that we had. It's obviously an issue I think that's at the forefront of a lot of folks' minds is, what are we doing about, about the housing availability, about the repercussions that result in homelessness and how that impacts downtown Beaverton, yes, of course, but also just Beaverton at large. So it's really a larger conversation than just, downtown Beaverton. Of course, there's repercussions there. So it's, very exciting and encouraging to see the city taking action and addressing this very real need and creating the first ever year-round shelter in Beaverton. I think this was a great session that was actually more of a learning opportunity for a lot of folks to kind of address some of the stigma and myths that exist, around folks who are experiencing homelessness, and really gave us I think it highlighted the fact that, of course, we're here to advise Bureau and give our feedback, but there's also an opportunity for us to be learning. And this was a great example of that, to learn about the kind of like larger picture issues that are impacting our city and obviously society kind of as a whole, but also gave us the opportunity to learn about what the city's doing about this so we can kind of spread that knowledge to folks in our own communities. And like I said, I think that's kind of the other side of the coin of this committee, is both advising but also learning and then sharing that knowledge with our families or friends or whoever it may be. So kind of answer that question when everyone asks, what's the city doing about homelessness? What's the city doing? Here we actually have a legitimate answer that we can provide and direct people to learn more about it. Okay. And our final session of the year was our Bureau 5-year plan. This was a fantastic opportunity for the team to actually come and sit down with us to go over the 5-year plan and get really have a work session regarding that and get URAC's opinion and feedback on that and help really guide that 5-year action plan. So I'm glad I'm here today because I believe that's on the agenda for tonight. So looking forward to learning a little bit more about where that all, how that feedback was taken into consideration and applied. So really, I think this is my final slide of the night. The last one, of course, is a big thank you to everyone and a photo of your lovely URAC members here, so you can get an idea of who it is that's on this committee. A lot of fantastic folks that dedicate their time and show up every month and ready to discuss these, and help shape the future of downtown Beaverton. So with that, I'll just say thank you and appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Paige.
Yeah.
Are there any questions or comments from the Bureau Board? Okay, well, I will say again, just a huge thank you, Paige. You're weighing in on such critical projects that this Bureau agency and entity are engaged in, and it's just really nice to know that there's a group of thoughtful people weighing in on all these projects. And I'll also be curious to hear how your feedback influenced that 5-year plan. So thank you so much for serving on the board and for joining us tonight. I'm going to give my colleagues one more chance in case there's anything else to say.
I'll just jump in. Thanks, Paige. I feel like I need to go on a walk in the city, and I've done a walk, but I feel like I need to do another walk. So thanks for selling us on the walk. because
Yeah.
walking and biking is the way to go. So
Well, certainly, yeah. And as you can see, well, actually, this photo isn't from then, but it's a beautiful. We usually do it in, in the summertime, so it's a beautiful time in the evening to get a nice walk around the city. And like I said, it really, I think it's a highlight of our time of UREC. So anyone is welcome to join.
thank you.
We would love to have you.
Well, thank you. All right, and Director Duggar.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Paige, for this. Really appreciate the update, and I know there's a lot of work. I won't belabor the points, but throughout the year, right? Not just presenting, but showing up and doing all this education. I wonder, and I don't have the answer to this, and I don't expect you or anyone to have the answer as much as just want to put this out there. But I often think, I know Councilor Teeter and Board Member Teeter and I talk a lot about tactical urbanism, right? And I know we've tasked a lot for URAC on not only engaging with us and learning about the various projects in the city, but I also wonder, I don't know if it's a challenge or what it is, but I want to support this, but like tactical urbanism, right? Like small things that we can do too.
Yeah.
I think you guys have a wealth of expertise, and it would be transformational too for you all to think about ways in which you can activate the spaces downtown instead of just advising on them too, right? Like, can we do tactical urbanism? Can we do small events or small items, right? Like I would love to hear that, because I would love to support them, right? Because we often think about urban renewal in these big capital intensive projects, and I don't think it always has to be. It can be start with a simple idea and let's pilot it and see if it works and run from there. So just more of a general comment. I just wanted to recognize all the work that goes into this throughout the year, throughout the meetings, your missed dinner with your families, and all of this to do this work. So thank you, but also,
Yeah.
I would love to support some more smaller tactical stuff if you guys are up for it.
It's certainly something to, Tyler's on this call, right? And I'm no longer chair, but I know that he can bring that to the chairperson and discuss, what fit that into one of our meetings, one of our topics at hand, right? So I think there's room in the agenda for that. I'm kind of speaking for Tyler here, but we're always looking, for important things to take to the URAC committee and discuss. And so I think that's a great idea.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you both. Thank you again, Paige, for joining us.
Yeah. Is it all right if I stick around for the rest of it?
Yeah, you definitely can. All right, so next up is Bureau Bill 2024-71, the Bureau 5-year plan forecast expenditures discussion. This is the next step after our work sessions from November and January, where staff and the consultant team brought us together in drafting Bureau's strategic priorities for the next 5 years. Tonight, we will dig into the forecasting of the possible expenditures. Staff and Tiberius team, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Board Chair and Board members. Good evening. Tyler Harrison, Staff Liaison to the Bureau. And before we get into it, Paige, great job. Thank you for coming tonight and sharing the past year. And it's such an important piece of the puzzle of what the governance is of Bureau, is having the advisory committee and help feed and talk to proper project managers and help us kind of get to the point where we can have tonight's discussion. And so I think it was a really nice lead. I appreciate that, Paige, for your time on this. Good evening. We've got Nick and Elaine back. Nick Popnick from Tiberius Solutions, Elaine Howard from Elaine Howard Consulting. Janine is joining us, as well as Dan Weinheimer. And we're all at your call tonight as we get into some numbers. You've seen your packets, lots of different numbers, but I think what I'd like to open with is the fact that we've been tasked to be thinking about our next 5 years. And we have come to you in various capacities in the last few months in order to help bring tonight for us to all get together and talk about our forecast. The forecast is basically a point. It's a point in time. It's a point to shoot for. It's a point for us to consider. But at that point can move and it can change, and it's not set in stone. We have got some things in there that we've pulled out a little bit just to make sure we've highlighted for you. And as we start working into our budget for fiscal year 25, the Bureau Board will ultimately approve and give that recommendation, or recommend to City Council to recommend for their approval consideration of the budget. And that happens each year. So what we see here may not necessarily what we end up with at the end of the day. And as Alicia brought in to public comment, First Street dining comments, great example. What we have put into the forecast is if we decide to elect to do something between Hall and Watson on First, these are some numbers for design, numbers for construction. Is it going to look like that? Yeah, maybe not. Does it actually happen? Maybe, maybe not. We don't know. But we've had some conversations at council level. We've had conversations with the Bureau Board. We just don't quite have the exact understanding of where we'll go. But we've put it in. And so that I just want to make that pretty clear is if we have $10 million for property acquisition in the next 5 years, we may not be doing acquisition of $10 million worth, but we have added it into the forecast. Those numbers can change. We were going to try to keep coming back to you every couple of years at least to refocus and make sure we're on track. And if you added up all the numbers after 5 years and our maximum indebtedness of what we've already accumulated, you'll see there's about 11 million left over. And that's something for us to be thinking about. And Nick's going to get into that a little bit in more detail. But as we think of the 30-year plan, do we want to be aggressive? Do we want to do a slow roll? There's pros and cons all the way around, and having our debt is part of the conversation ultimately gets us to where we're going. And so tonight we do have a few members who are not here for various reasons, and it's unfortunate. So we don't necessarily expect to come up with this is the final blessing. However, if we feel like we're in the right track, we'll take that information and we'll come back ultimately with a consent item of, here we go. A lot I wanted to say there. I'm going to now pass it over to Elaine, and I'll be quiet for a little spell. Elaine.
Thank you, Tyler. So the agenda tonight is a recap of the proposed strategic priorities, reviewing the draft 5-year plan forecast expenditures, seeking your input on the draft 5-year plan forecast expenditures, and then next steps. The questions that we'd like you to keep in mind as we walk through the presentation is there any further input on the 5-year strategic priorities? Are there any clarifying questions on the 5-year forecast expenditures? Have we identified the correct projects to address the 5-year strategic priorities? In our meeting last month, we went through the 5-year plan priorities that came from our meetings both with your board and with the advisory committee. Those strategic priorities are in 3 main categories: capital infrastructure support, strategic investment and redevelopment support, placemaking, and community identity. In capital infrastructure support, that is things like multimodal transportation, creek improvements and amenities, infrastructure that catalyzes private investment, redevelopment, and increased pedestrian use. Strategic investment and redevelopment support are things like affordable housing, redevelopment of the Bureau property, expanding investment geographically, and other types of support. The placemaking and community identity support are strengthening the identity of Beaverton's core and invest in strategic short-term activations as part of implementing the long-term strategy. This is an overview of the largest potential 5-year forecast expenditures, and I will walk through this, and then Nick, I think, or Nick, did you want to do this one?
Sure, Elaine, I can
Okay.
I can hop in here.
Okay.
if it's got numbers on the slide, it's probably my responsibility to present it. Glad to be back with everybody virtually tonight. I am slightly under the weather, although with 2 kids in daycare, being slightly under the weather is pretty much my baseline. In your packet, you'll have a large one-page table that shows all of the buckets that were approved by voters for the categories of projects and the planned expenditures on individual line items over the next 5 years. The next several slides summarize that material. You may find it helpful to follow along by looking at that one-page table in your packet. This slide is just highlighting the largest expenditures that you'll see on that list. These are important because as we look at the next 5 years, we're looking at over $80 million of proposed expenditures. But of those expenditures, about 60 million of them are allocated to specific projects and programs in those key buckets that were approved by voters. And these 7 projects alone account for 50 million of the 60 million. So really what we're looking at with these bullet points on screen would be the bulk of the expenditures happening over the next 5 years. And as Tyler mentioned, after this 5-year period, we're looking at having roughly $11 million of remaining maximum indebtedness. So that means that these projects would not just be the bulk of the next 5 years, but they'd really be looking at the bulk of the remaining life of your urban renewal area. So certainly lots to think about as you're plotting the next 5 years and what projects are going to receive the remaining urban renewal funds here. On the one hand, when we're talking about 60, 80 million dollars, these are big dollar amounts, but maximum indebtedness is a hard limit, and you will come up to the end of that in the not too distant future. I also will reiterate what Tyler said, that this is not written in stone. We are here tonight to receive your input. Based on your input, we will bring back a final version of this, but the final version is not making all of your spending decisions for the next 5 years. It's just a plan. It's a forecast of where you might be spending these dollars, but every single year you'll be doing the usual budget process, and through that budget process, you'll be making decisions on where you want to spend these dollars. As we hear your input tonight, and as we work on making final revisions to these numbers, there will be a couple of constraints that we need to keep in mind, and those constraints may limit our ability to fund projects of a certain dollar amount in a certain time frame or certain categories. So in particular, we're going to be limited by your actual cash flows and by the terms of any future indebtedness that come up, what's going on in the global financial markets, what are interest rates at the time that you're looking to borrow. At this point in time, the numbers that we put in front of you, we believe are realistic and financially feasible given current market conditions. And then another, but if you were to try to say, let's fund more projects sooner, you might be getting into a territory where it may just not be feasible to borrow more than what's currently presented. And then when we're looking at the allocations to individual categories, when we get down into the joint investment category, you'll notice that there's more dollars currently allocated to that category than the total percentage breakdown that was approved by voters. There are ways that we can accommodate that through looking at how program income is handled. The voter approval only has to do with your maximum indebtedness, program income, any revenue source other than TIF is not subject to maximum indebtedness. Additionally, we still haven't finished allocating all of the staffing costs to the individual project categories, and the way that staff determines to allocate those staffing costs may also help to smooth over the transitions between these project categories. So we're going to work on sharpening our pencil to make sure that everything fits. But just to keep in mind, if we have feedback tonight where you'd like to spend particularly more or less in a certain category of projects, we may be limited by what the voters approved to accomplish that. All that being said, let's dig into the actual numbers now. The largest project that is on the list planned here is the downtown loop in the transportation and infrastructure category, estimated to have $16 million of TIF funding. That is just the Bureau contribution to the project. as the overall project costs may be larger than that and maybe tapping other funding sources as well. Next largest line item on the list is affordable housing at a little over 11 million. That's primarily intended to fund one large affordable housing project, and that's based on the city's experience with other affordable housing projects that have been built in the area in recent years, and how much public investment is required to have these significant projects be completed. The next is property acquisition and due diligence. That's a little over 10 million. That would be spread out over a range of potential new opportunity sites. That's property acquisition specifically for development and redevelopment, as opposed to acquiring property for infrastructure improvements. The building improvement and other grants and loans at 3.7 million. Now we're looking at your incentive programs and the really popular incentives that you guys have had in recent years for storefront improvements and tenant improvements and assisting those local businesses in the community. Transportation and connectivity at 3.6 million. Those are unspecified projects related to transportation and connectivity in the future. So that is the largest, transportation and infrastructure is the largest bucket of projects approved by voters. A lot of that funding in future years being earmarked right now for the loop, but there are other dollars that will be available to be spent on transportation type projects, whether that's for pedestrian improvements, cyclist improvements, other vehicular improvements or streetscape improvements. There's still some funds available for those types of projects. Property management of just under 3 million. That's for properties that the Bureau has already acquired and will be working on finding opportunities to redevelop those sites. But in the meantime, Bureau owns those properties and has to manage those properties. And then last on the list here of the large big ticket items is the First Street Dining Commons. As we heard during public comment, and as Tyler mentioned as well, this is what's estimated for this project to cost if Bureau moves forward with it, but it does sound like there's certainly still some uncertainty about the way to move forward or whether or not to move forward with that project. And we will then try to quickly roll through the next several slides here. Again, these are all just snippets of what you have in your packet on that one large table. We're going to go through the slides showing each bucket of projects separately. So this is the transportation and infrastructure improvements, $23.8 million estimated over the next 5 years. We mentioned that the largest was the loop, and the next largest are the to be determined transportation and connectivity projects. You'll also see 2 line items here for parking garage operations and parking compliance. So with the construction of the garage, Bureau has taken over a significant parking program, and those expenditures are couched in this transportation and infrastructure improvements category. And then the last line item, the smallest one in this category, are infrastructure improvements. These would be, again, undefined projects, but potentially undergrounding utilities or regional stormwater infrastructure, sort of the non-transportation infrastructure improvements. In the joint investment category, again, we've covered the property acquisition and due diligence and the affordable housing line items, property management as well. So all of those were on that list of the largest line items. But some of the other things in here include pre-development assistance, other plan and DES implementation. So there's still need for ongoing planning efforts in this area. And then the central garage tenant improvements and management. So some other components of the garage, not directly related to parking, but related to the retail spaces that are there. And as I mentioned, this category, you can see voters approved 33% of the maximum indebtedness. When we look at the expenditures over the next 5 years, what we've currently allocated here is 48% of the upcoming expenditures. So that does put pressure on the ability to fund all the projects as identified here. Again, program income is not subject to maximum indebtedness, so we are exploring ways that we can use your program income to be able to achieve these expenditures. And again, still looking at the most appropriate way to allocate staffing costs and how that will affect how much is allocated to individual categories. Debt services and oversight is the least exciting bucket that we have here. It's also the maybe the least appropriately named bucket. The actual debt service payments don't belong in any of these buckets because this is dividing up your maximum indebtedness. Maximum indebtedness only applies to the principal cost of projects and programs. So when you borrow money to pay for them and then you're paying that debt off over time, those debt service payments don't count towards maximum indebtedness because otherwise you'd be double counting all of your expenditures. So what we have in here are any costs associated with incurring new debt, and we do assume that you'd be taking on a fairly significant new borrowing a few years from now. We've estimated a $31 million borrowing in 2027 to be able to fund all the projects that we've identified here. And this is estimating that there'd be $600,000 of various banking fees, lawyer fees, et cetera, associated with borrowing funds. Frankly, that's probably a high estimate, but we like to be conservative. And then the other line items here are the administrative overhead costs. These aren't the staffing costs, but are all of the other sort of line items that you'll see in your budget, typically really small amounts for training costs or travel expenses, insurance, the cost of the annual audit, those kinds of things. So that's what's in this category now. We, again, need to go back and look at where all of our staffing costs are being allocated. A portion of that is likely going to wind up in this category, but not all of the staffing costs of the entire agency. On incentive programs, this is a smaller slice of the overall pie, 7% of the maximum indebtedness as approved by the voters. The building improvement, storefront, tenant improvement grants and loans, those are certainly the bulk of the expenditures here, but we've also included in here a line item for pre-development grant program, smaller amounts than the other grants that are shown here. And then I believe our last bucket is the community identity. That's 4% of the maximum indebtedness, so a relatively small slice of the total pie, looking at close to $3 million over the next 5 years. As of this time, the largest one of those projects is that First Street Dining Commons, but as mentioned earlier, we hear that there is concern about planning those expenditures at this point in time. Other dollars that we see on here are for streetscape improvements, creek enhancements and amenities, and gateways, signage improvements, other identity improvements. Then we come to these unallocated costs, so we don't want these to be lost in the shuffle. As I mentioned, the debt service payments are not included in any of those buckets, so we're not double counting expenditures, but they are substantial expenditures. Currently, your outstanding debt has payments of $2.7 million per year. And then again, if we have a borrowing in 2027, you'd have additional payments beginning the next fiscal year ending 28, that is currently estimated to be another $2.5 million per year. So at that point in time, you'd be committed to over $5 million per year in debt service. That is a large amount of funding, but you're reaching the point of your plan where you are spending most of your money on debt service. Your maximum indebtedness is coming towards the end. So once you've finished funding all the projects through your maximum indebtedness, your TIF dollars are meant to be dedicated to paying off that debt. And once the debt is repaid, then ceasing to collect that tax increment revenue over time. And then also on here, you'll see the estimated staffing charges. Those are based on the current year level of staffing expenses, but then showing inflation over time for the next 5 years. Those do need to be allocated to the other buckets. There's just some leeway in terms of exactly what bucket those dollars get allocated to, and we'll be working with staff to make sure we're making logical decisions on how we can allocate those dollars to the individual buckets. This table also, I believe, has a corresponding table in your packet. This is showing every one of those line items for the projects that are anticipated to be funded over the next 5 years, and then matching those line items with the 3 strategic priorities. And the key takeaway from this table is that each of these projects does align very well with at least one of the strategic priorities, and most of them align with multiple strategic priorities. And that aligning with multiple priorities was something that I remember hearing as we had our first kind of listening brainstorming sessions with you, where there were lots of projects that could fit in one category or another, but folks tended to have the most enthusiasm about projects that could check multiple boxes and things that, yes, they're an infrastructure improvement, but they're also going to help us, with placemaking. And so wherever you can see multiple check marks on the same row, that's showing a project that does a good job at accomplishing multiple objectives for Bureau. So thanks for bearing with me as we ran through what all is in your packet. I'm going to turn things back to Elaine to focus on the questions and gathering your feedback on all of these 5 years worth of numbers and financial forecasts.
I'm sure you probably have a lot of questions. What we'd like to do is try to work through these questions first, and I imagine that some of your questions fit under these prescribed questions that we're starting with. So the first one is there any further input on those 5-year strategic priorities? We went through those at the last meeting. We've vetted those a couple of times with you, but we wanted to just give you the opportunity to see whether there was any further input you wanted to provide on those before we move forward.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Elaine. So first up, we'll have Board Member Tivnon and then Board Member Teeter.
Great, thank you. A no to the first question. I feel like we've had lots of great opportunities to provide input, and I can't think of any additional comments that I have that haven't already been captured. As far as clarifying questions, I had two. The first one was, this is a forecast, it's over several years. As the caveats at the beginning make clear, things can change. We might change course on some things, like the First Street Dining Commons was a great example of that, since there's still decisions to be made around that, decisions to be made around other things. How often are we going to be checking in on this? And are we going to be using this? And this, I'm not sure who this is a question for, but are we going to use this on a regular basis to kind of track where the funding is going, and if it is going to the items that are on here, and the pace at which we're making these different types of investments into these projects, and what is that going to look like?
Yeah, Chair, maybe I'll take that one if that's okay. So Board Member Tivnon, I think in the next slide, actually, we have a note in there saying every 1 to 2 years is when we expect to come back on. Yeah, that very last line. Thank you, Nick. Is kind of the thought process. We in the past we have done it in a couple different ways. And I think the one that we don't want to do is, gosh, the last time we did one was in 2020. And now we are in 24, right? And so and because we are in such a unique spot at the time of our agency, we want to come back to at least the 1 to 2 years. We don't think we need to have this process that we have done the last few months. That seems like a lot, but we have a really good point to work off of. And of course, each budget year we have our budget cycle that we'll actually be having that conversation too.
Yeah, I would be in favor of doing it every year and not letting it slide, just because things change quickly, and if we do make decisions that affect any of these project areas, reallocating that funding is going to take some brain power and guidance from staff and others. So yeah, that's just my notes on that one. And then this is just a reminder for me to so for it came up during the URAC presentation too, around parking compliance, and we're putting money towards that program. When tickets are written, there's a penalty fee, correct, for that, or are they just warnings right now?
No, there is a citation that occurs after the first warning, and so there is a fee associated with each parking ticket after that warning.
Okay. And so that gets me to the question, because I thought that there was, I couldn't remember the details of it. Does that money go back to BIRA?
Yeah, actually, and we do have our treasurer and assistant treasurer for BIRA on tonight. There are some handling fees that need to go back to pay the staffing on as kind of the general fund, and then there's BIRA that comes back to BIRA, and that's how the system should be set up for, is a split of some sort. I think it was a 60-40 split was what was discussed in order to ensure, as it goes through the court system, that there is some staffing involved. If my understanding, if the citation goes ahead and gets paid directly, then I believe the majority, if not all of that, goes back to Bureau. So that would be program income.
Okay, yeah, and I know that's something we've been talking about, is potentially looking at opportunities for program income. I don't imagine that this is going to amount to a ton of money, but it would be good as part of the forecast updates for any program income, including any parking citation fees, to just be included in there. Not only to know how much came back into the coffers, but also how many citations were given out, and that could help inform future planning to see what that ends up looking like. So that's all I had written down. I'm looking forward to hearing what others ask tonight.
Thank you. All right, so Director Teeter and then Director Ducker.
Okay, thanks. I've got 3 questions and 1 or 2 comments. First comment, I would prefer, I think, to return to this at least next year, and then seeing if we do it every year, every couple years. Reason why I would like to come back to this next year is because we've got a few really big decisions to make this year with regards to the Milliken Way Extension project and the dining commons, and I'm sure we'll be learning more about the loop. But those are some pretty big projects that still have a little lack of clarity that we might have better determined in the future. My first question is, I guess it relates to the transportation and connectivity line item. I was thinking of the Milliken Way Extension project, and staff recently shared some materials with the community. It showed potential timeline, maybe construction starting at least on portions of it in 2027. Was it part of the plan for Bureau to fund Milliken Way Extension project improvements? Do we have enough there? How does that all fit in?
Board Member Teeter, I'll try to answer. There has been 0 Bureau funds allocated to Milliken from any budget that we have done so far. And as members of the public or council or board members that may not know, that is a MSTIP program, and which is Washington County program. Obviously, it could be an expensive project over time, but at this juncture, there has been 0 Bureau allocation to that project.
Okay. And that, because it's mostly coming from the county, I think my concern is just, I feel like the price estimates keep going up, and I wasn't sure if we should have that on our radar as Bureau in the future anyways, if not now. Okay. Second question, in 2026 and 2027, there's the line item for affordable housing in the joint investment category. It jumps from $300,000 up to $10 million in 2026 and 2027, and then back down to $300,000. Is there a project coming up in that year that this is going towards?
The Hopes is one of the redevelopment sites that Bureau has in our portfolio, would include an affordable housing project. We would love to have the state move forward with some of the things that we're hearing coming out of the state that could help us out. And if that's the case, we may not need to have 10 million of Bureau money towards that project, and we could put it towards another project or something else. And but at this point in time, we recognize through the Metro Housing Bond Program that each project takes a significant amount of public subsidy, and coming to the table is important. And so to meet our goals in the plan of mixed incomes of different types of housing around transit-oriented development stations in our area, this is a way of accomplishing that.
Okay, great. I like that. And then The final question I have is related to creek enhancements and amenities in the community identity category. Um, that's still that's pretty low, so a total of $100,000 over the next 5 years. Um, I feel like creek enhancements were a pretty big priority for, I mean, at least for me. I think some of the other board members too. Can you touch on the funding for this, or if we can get creek restoration through any of the other categories, or any thoughts here?
Yeah, great question. And you're, you've got the same frame of mind that I probably do, Board Member Teeter, which Creekside Master Plan, and we've had some of those conversations, right? And if we went back and did an audit, I'm trying to see if I have it here in my background. I don't think I do. If we did an audit of the Creekside Master Plan strategies, we'd knock it out of the park, except for one of these areas of Creekside work. In the Career Renewal Plan, Creekside Enhancement Amenities is in that low category of that 4% community identity. However, stormwater infrastructure, and that can be tied back into it, is in the 48% category of transportation infrastructure. And so we have some opportunities there. We just have not figured it out what would make sense and how a project using stormwater, creek enhancements, trails along the creek, all those access to the creek, all those elements, floodplain and mitigation can actually fit. But we recognize that as an area that we have not done a great job on thus far.
Okay. It sounds like you and I are asking some of the same questions, and I could see some of it fitting in with property acquisition or infrastructure improvements and things like that.
Great point. Great point.
So final comment I have is related to the dining commons. Just from my city council perspective, some of the concern about funding there was about burden on general fund or the streets fund. Now with my bureau hat on, I'm okay keeping this here in the community identity category because bureau doesn't have the same budget challenges that the city funds do. And given that we just don't know a whole lot about what the future direction will be, this feels like it leaves some flexibility open for whatever that direction will be that we decide on over the next year or so. So I like this being here, and I can support this 5-year plan. I think this is really good.
If it's possible, I can add like just a tiny skosh onto the dining commons piece and just clarify that it's earmarked for construction and amenities, not operations. And so there still is not a funding source for operations between the general fund and well, there's not a fund and not anything in bureau that would fund operations. So just to clarify that.
No, that's great. Thanks, Dan. That's all I've got.
Okay, Director Duggar.
Yeah, I have a couple questions and then some feedback. The first one in the category of the gateway signage, community identity part, that seems really low to me. And I've kind of long thought this. I'd love for us to really define Central Beaverton a little bit more. A lot of people don't really know what downtown is other than maybe Old Town. They don't know how the area around Lombard and Second fits in. We don't know around the transit station and then over by the round. Like they all feel a little different to me, and I think that's an opportunity. A few of us kind of joked about maybe doing like a giant beaver sign or something like that, and you would not believe the amount of comments of people that were like, yes, that please. So I think this feels like an opportunity for us to use signage to create some distinct identities within the different subregions of downtown. And this feels like it might be underfunded a little bit to me. With that in mind, I know there was I think it's 200,000 one year. It still feels underfunded to me as far as creating that. I'm going to also echo what Councilor Teeter said, Board Member Teeter said on the creek enhancement. This seems like a missed opportunity, particularly in light of the Downtown Parks project and things like the Hall Street Grill project opening, or getting ready for construction kickoff or whatever. Like we're going to have a lot of more residents downtown soon. Is
Did I freeze or did Counselor Duggar freeze?
I think he froze.
Okay. All right, we'll see. We'll give him a few more seconds. See if it catches up. Okay, we're gonna have board member Lair go, and I will let Counselor Duggar know that we'll let him back in when his Wi-Fi stabilizes.
Great. Well, Dan answered my first question about the construction versus operations on the First Street Dining Commons. I think I would also echo Counselor Duggar's point about the streetscapes and the placemaking. I know this discussion has come up multiple times, but the fact that there's no real way to identify when you're in downtown Beaverton, and I think that would be a big improvement. Even if you think of just little tiny towns that have a welcome to whatever, it gives a different feel rather than, okay, I'm driving by a bunch of car dealerships and hey, maybe there's some restaurants down there, but I don't really know. So that might be an area where we look at a little more closely. The other question I had on the joint investment section for the property acquisition, we've got fairly large numbers each year. Is this just a estimate? This is what we think we're going to spend, or is there actually a line of sight on making some acquisitions in around these amounts?
Yeah, board member Lear, great question. We have nothing planned whatsoever. It's one of our greatest tools as an agency of being able to control our destiny with acquisition. There's been times when we have knocked on people's doors, and then there's been times when others have knocked on our doors. And this is a placeholder, and that may or may not have any relevance in the 5 years. But we have put down numbers, and we recognize that property values are increasing. And with that, we have to be thinking through what our costs are. And some of it is not just acquisition, it's the due diligence and what that actually takes in order to figure it out. Somebody may knock on our door, we may do an appraisal, we may do some research, that costs money. And we may not we may not just go after it, we may pull back and say it's not for us. Or we may lose out on another potential bid. So it is definitely a placeholder at this point in time.
Okay, thanks, Tyler. That's all I have.
Okay, it looks like board member Duggar is back, so let's try to have him finish his comment.
Hey, thanks. Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. I think I was talking about the creek enhancements, but that just it felt like that number is a little low. So I would agree with board member Teeter there. Particularly, I think about all the residents coming downtown, and it's really our only bit of water, and particularly in light of the Downtown Parks project too, with TH Beardy and some other stakeholders, I think that could really help if we rethought about that. I have a couple clarifying questions. I share the same question Councilor Teeter had about the 10 million in affordable housing. He's already asked that, but I do think I would love to see us rethink this as far as I've heard of some places, instead of acting like is one big guaranteer or one big lump sum of money, they buy affordable units in market rate developments for a period of 10 to 20 years for a much smaller amount. So I don't know if that's even feasible or possible, but that might help kick off some of these other developments too. And then we have mixed income opportunities. I think would be some clarity around that. The garage operations, I did have a clarifying question around that too. I was wondering if the 1.7 million in operations, does that represent a break-even point? Because that doesn't even include the separate line of 1.8 million for tenant improvements and management too. And so I'm trying to wrap my head around and that both of those numbers together, which are 3 point some odd million, don't represent the debt service on the garage. So I'm like that's a massive expenditure in money over multiple years, and I'm trying to wrap my head around when is our break-even point on that? What is the plan to get us there? And if we don't, this isn't the budget meeting, so we don't necessarily have to do that. But I'm a little disturbed by the amount of money that we spend year over year just keeping the garage for what its purpose is right now. And then property acquisition also seems really high for me. Like I get really nervous when we talk about like targeted acquisition here and there. I think is okay in the right situation. I know not everyone agrees with me on that, but my concern is we're continuing to distort the market. If we are a buyer, then we're artificially, raising the price of land and for especially for smaller businesses and other people that might want to open. And I think we should be really, really careful with that and only buy what we need. I'm totally okay with using other targeted incentives and whatnot, but that just makes me really nervous as far as allocating that much money for that. And I know, again, this isn't the budget, so we'll have a chance to play with that, but it seems to be a lower priority for me, as far as making up money for other things that I had mentioned, like the gateway signage and the creek enhancements and things like that. But I think that's everything. And hopefully I'm not frozen.
Not frozen. I have a few comments I can make to address some of your questions there, and similar questions shared by other board members. Yeah, I've heard several folks ask about increased funding for the sort of placemaking projects. Given the restrictions that the voters approved, there are limited avenues to explore for increasing funding for any of those things, whether it's signage or creekside enhancements. One is you could make cuts from one of the other projects that's in that same bucket and reallocate those dollars. And in particular, in that bucket, the only real significant line item is the First Street Dining Commons. So that is one opportunity there. Another opportunity is if you can identify projects that would achieve goals that are consistent with streetscape improvements, creek enhancements, gateway and signage, but that also would fit within the definition of another bucket. And so, as Tyler mentioned, there may be some things you could do under infrastructure that would also count towards creek enhancements and amenities. And I could see similar things for gateway and signage improvements that, depending on exactly what that looks like, could potentially be part of a transportation and infrastructure project. So that's another avenue to explore. The third thing is to explore program income. And is there any expected program income in the coming years that could be dedicated to this projects within this category? Anything you're spending on program income allows you to spend more than the limited share from the maximum indebtedness. Right now, the largest amounts of program income that we're forecasting are from parking garage operations, and you do have flexibility on where you could spend that within Bureau's budget. So that is one opportunity here. There is going to be competing demands for that. As we mentioned already, the joint investment program has a lot of expenditures forecast for the next 5 years, and those expenditures won't be possible unless you're assuming some program income revenue is going to be available for that category. Likewise, there's an argument to be made that the parking garage revenues and the parking program revenues should be applied to parking garage operations, keeping it all sort of in-house, getting to a break-even point, as you were mentioning. And so there's an argument to be made that that's where that program income should be coming from. Another potential source of program income would be from continued land acquisitions and then reselling or leasing that property out to private developers. Any proceeds you get from the resale or from leasing counts as program income and could fund additional activities in these categories. And then the last piece is, again, we're still looking at allocating the operating costs, the staffing costs, and how much staffing cost really belongs in each of these buckets. But it's possible that we could have less staffing costs allocated to this category, which would free up a little bit more capacity for other expenditures in this category. So we're going to be looking at all of those different levers as we try to finalize these expenditures. But I'm certainly hearing folks asking for some more expenditures on certain line items within this community identity bucket. And those are the constraints we're working in and the levers we're going to try to pull to help accommodate that.
Okay. And Tyler, I don't know, do you have the clarity on the break even of the garage?
Yeah, I can try to answer. I don't have clarity on
Sure,
exactly
sure.
to answer your question. A few months ago, we came in and we had conversation about permits, and because that was not something that we had at our leisure yet. We've also talked about and got approval for increasing of parking fees in the garage. Yeah, so these are things that we have not implemented yet, and we want to, kind of test things out, right? We don't want to go one extreme to another by any stretch of the imagination. The permits is going to be something that we think is going to be a popular program, and especially during the daytime for some users, and maybe some for the nighttime users. And those are real easy ways to increase our revenue streams. As far as expenditures go in the garage, we have not only the operations management piece, but we also have security. And security is a large cost. And we pride ourselves in that garage of having a very secure option for those who are willing to come to the central Beaverton district and cruise around. And they feel safe because we have cameras and we have people 24/7. And so a decision could be made to not do that full security. That would be something we would want to talk about. But at this point, that is something that we are providing as opposed to some other drugs.
Yeah, that's helpful. Uh, I don't want to bog us down tonight in those budget level decisions and policy, but that's helpful. Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, it looks like Janine has something to add.
I just wanted to add that Bureau owns the 5 acres of property just a block away. And so when redevelopment happens on those sites, that's a real asset having that garage just a block away and should be really helpful with getting more turnover there.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Janine. I didn't think about that. Hopefully, I just want to get us as close to operationally, generating that cash flow, even if it's, within reason, as close as possible, at least as quickly as possible. So, thank you.
All right, Board Member Hassan.
Yeah, thanks for this presentation. I think for some of us, like the numbers, like having the numbers in there is like really just kind of making our eyes go big. And so I'll jump into a couple comments and then we'll see if there's any questions. Councilor Tivnan mentioned more check-ins. I would support that. I really do think it will be important for us to be able to pivot as we learn more. So whatever we need to do that, I support it. Councilor Duggar and a couple others were kind of talking about what I see as transportation connectivity in the community identity place. So I'm just gonna like maybe ask this question. When we talk about like building a district or like those kinds of wayfinding things, do you count that more as community identity or do you count that as transportation and connectivity? What do you think?
Are you asking me or
whoever would answer that question?
Okay. I'll be happy to answer.
Sure.
I see it kind of both ways, right? And let's put the loop hat on for the evening. I know Jean's watching tonight, and there's things that, as the loop gets into some details, that it might create an identity for the type of street lights, for the street furnishings that we choose, things that kind of bring everything together. I use if you go into any major city and go to Chinatown, right? You see the red lampposts.
Yeah.
There's a certain structure to a Chinatown that when you're there, you're there. And more of our today's urban environments that get created, they try to all use a certain type of furnishing, so you can get to understanding where you're at. And then, of course, signage, marketing, those types of things definitely is helpful, and that could be part of the loop and the loop expense versus the community identity. Now, if we want to do something more quickly, if we're just trying to make sure that we are supporting our downtown today, this would be the bucket I would think would be appropriate to use.
Okay. I bring it up because I think transportation and connectivity and the wayfinding is it's like a big piece, and I just want us to be really be intentional and involved. And I do think there's folks in this group, including myself, that are passionate about what transportation and connectivity means. So I guess I just want to make sure I say that kind of for you all to hear. On joint investment, I think, and I say this kind of loosely, just looking at your numbers, I'd really like to see more dollars attached to the downtown equity strategy implementation. I feel like we did a lot of work for that, and I actually think a lot of our folks might not have been around for the downtown equity strategy, but we did this like huge body of work. We talked a lot with businesses. We got a lot of feedback, and so I just like to consider potentially putting more dollars into that. I'll trust where you're going as staff, but it felt like big bodies of work that I think are really important and crucial. I'd love to continue to see more culturally specific restaurants in our central Beaverton and just continue to see us supporting businesses in Beaverton. I know a couple folks already brought up the creeks and the gateway and signage, so I'm just going to elevate it again. I do think I'm going to jump to on my own screen to community identity. I do think like really thinking about wayfinding and gateways and signage is a big piece. And to Nick's point, and this might be a little unpopular, I have shared my concerns for First Street Dining Commons. I love First Street Dining Commons, and I don't know what I'm saying no to by continuing to fund it. And so if it means taking a little more out of that or reallocating, I support that. I think there's a lot of opportunity in the gateways, signage, and other identity spaces. And then the last thing I was going to mention, sorry, I'm like going back and forth between multiple things that I want to make sure that I say. I think just like next time when this comes back to us, like less with dollars next to them and more like a policy understanding of what the policy is. So like transportation and connectivity, what are like the policies associated with that? I think that will help me start to wrap my head around this some more. Because I know we talked really big picture back in November about like ideas. I know like arts district was an idea that came up. And so creating these little things. So that I think just in my head kind of helps me think about this a little bit more strategically. Comments, thoughts? Janine's off mute, so I'm like, yeah, go for it.
I'm going to go back to a little bit earlier in what you said about community identity and gateways and wayfinding signage in particular. That is fairly called out under the urban renewal plan, like page 16. So we just have to be a little bit careful because we do have those buckets and they are called out very specifically in this category. But the loop is, like Tyler said, is a really good example of how that can sort of cross categories. But that is one that is very much spelled out in the plan when it comes to like the signage elements. And as far as the DEI, a lot of that is actually embedded in the line items. This is actually the most broken out 5-year action plan we've ever done. We really kind of, we call out the First Street Dining Commons. So we have it a little bit more broken out, but so I'll use the property acquisition category as an example. Under that, we have some of the recommendations under the downtown equity strategy for additional relocation assistance that isn't mandatory, but to provide that assistance. That's all embedded into that acquisition line item. So you've got due diligence, you've got tenant relocation assistance, all in that number. And so by the time you actually spend the money on the property itself, it's quite low by the time you pay for all the extra things. So those are embedded, and then the other grants and loans, that's partly considering how do we implement the downtown equity strategy going forward. So they're in there, it's just not as called out.
Thank you. It does appreciate to have, like, I appreciate you calling that out. I do think and I'll just say this, and then I think Elaine, you want to say something. Like, wayfinding and gateway, like that stuff. I think I heard it from Counselor Duggar. I think I heard a little bit of from Board Member Lair. Like I just think that's an area of opportunity because I do wonder like where does Central Beaverton begin? And so I'd love to see us try to focus on what those ideas and those concepts look like. Elaine?
I had a couple of comments, and one thing that I should have talked about at the very beginning is that as we've been looking at the strategic priorities and the projects, it's all within those three overarching documents. So the urban renewal plan itself, the Beaverton Downtown Equity Strategy goals, and the Bureau Portfolio Redevelopment Strategy goals. So understanding that implementation of all of these projects have to be looked at through the lens of like the equity strategy. So I'm glad that you brought that up, and that is really important. And that is kind of up here, overarching, and everything underneath it has to go with or to take a look back at those documents. So I think that's really helpful to understand. And I think the other thing to think about, and I totally agree with gateway signage, other identity, that's really important. And it may be as you look forward in the future and you see that this particular grouping doesn't have the amount of money that you're constrained to, that you look to some of your other sources of funds, like your program income or other sources, to be able to allocate to this because it seems to be a really high priority for most of you at this point. So you might look to see whether you can add other funding outside of these constraints that we have because it was a citizen adopted plan.
Thank you. Can I actually ask one quick question? So sorry, but last one. If we want to do like pedestrian improvement type things, does that come into this as well, or would that come out of general fund? Like a walkway.
There's a lot of flexibility on the specific project. Pedestrian improvements could fit in a lot of places that would be within the ability to fund through Bureau or through other city funding sources.
Okay. I feel like a lot of our transportation friends might have some feels about that, but I will. Elaine has raised her hand, but I am done. Thank you very much.
All right. Board Member Kimmy.
Hi, so a lot of my questions were answered through all the director's questions. I just have a quick one where, so you said $80 million is left in our Bureau fund future?
Well, I said I think that the expenditures over the course of the 5 years would be 80 million, but that includes expenditures on new projects and on debt service. A lot of what we're looking at is your maximum indebtedness, and that doesn't count your debt service expenditures. And so the maximum indebtedness that we're looking at would be enough to fund the projects identified here, plus on another 11 million. And you've got 60 million worth of projects here, so we're saying you have capacity to fund roughly $71 million worth of projects going forward. That's even not all maximum indebtedness because some of that's already funds in your bank account that have already been counted against it, and some of that's program income. But if you're looking at what's your capacity to fund projects, real new projects in the future, setting aside admin costs and setting aside debt service, we're looking at around 71 million.
So that's half of 150 that's dedicated for Bureau since the beginning, right? 2011?
Right.
So we're looking at next 5 years spending almost all the available Bureau funding for investment for the future, right?
Right, yeah, and that's not uncommon. When we look at tax increment finance revenues, they tend to be exponential growth. You guys have had very, very strong, successful growth, so yours is increasing at a faster percent than others. But you'll typically see a point where urban renewal areas reach a point late in life where their revenue streams are just growing significantly more and more each year, and so a lot of the expenditures happen really quick towards the end as your financial capacity has just increased dramatically over these upcoming years.
Maybe you can teach me or elaborate a little more when you say income revenue for the future. Where is that money coming from? The investments that we are making right now, you're looking at more revenues coming in the year's future?
Yeah, so it's all from the growth in assessed value in the area. And that growth in assessed value due to Oregon's property tax system is mostly based on new construction activity, because without new construction, they're limited to 3% growth per year. So it's really new construction activity, which you've had a lot of in recent years that has allowed your annual revenue stream to already experience dramatic growth. And then on top of that growing annual cash flow, it's the ability to take on new debt. So we've assumed that there would be a new borrowing of over $30 million. So roughly half of the projects that we're talking about funding in this time frame are made possible by a new borrowing that's assumed here. And obviously, you're not required to do any additional borrowings. You could take more time and spend it on sort of a cash flow basis. But if you're looking to make as much of a bang for your buck as you can and get these dollars invested into projects in the community, to make a meaningful district sooner rather than later, and to avoid the cost of inflation as project costs go up over time, that's why we see most urban renewal areas choose to lean pretty heavily into taking on new debt, to get these projects finished sooner rather than later. A lot of times the true reason not to incur debt isn't because of financial risks, but just because of staffing capacity. And so I think, as you work on towards this 5-year plan, the staff will definitely need to make sure they've got an honest assessment of whether they're able to deliver $60 million worth of projects over the next 5 years. But if there's capacity to do so, the financial capacity is there.
Well, thank you for that. So there's a reason why I'm asking these questions, because I think we are in a crucial juncture where most of the funds that we'll be investing in the next 5 years will greatly affect our revenue stream in the future. So I'm looking at in that lens where we are making investments. So we are looking at ROI, right? In that lens, I think it's very important that we look at it where whatever money that we're spending, it has to come back in positive revenue. And I want to minimize somehow the money that has almost negative return one way or the other. So that's why I was asking that question. Second question is, when you talk about DES implementation, can you tell me what the implementation means? In a sense, where's the money? Where are you spending the money, and what kind of work?
Actually, I'm going to share my screen. And because I actually had this up for another reason earlier today. Councilor Kimmy, can you tell me, can you see that screen?
Yes.
Okay. So the Beaverton Downtown Equity Strategy has, I believe, 18 different strategies that were adopted by the board. And as you I'm not going to read through them all, but just have it up here, and hopefully I'll make it even a little bit bigger. Hopefully you can see that. And some of them are kind of specifically to business, technical assistance, and working on our building improvement program, affordable housing, trying to figure out different ways of providing incentives for low-cost housing preservation. It's not just the buy down that board member Duggar was talking about, but there's a mobile home park that is within the urban renewal area. And so we have a program that is budgeted in this past year, in which we are providing some assistance to improving those mobile homes that need some assistance to get them up to code. So we have some policies to work on, One that was catching my eye, I may have already passed through it, and that's number 4, marketing. And that kind of goes back to some of the things we were hearing tonight as well. What are we doing for our downtown? And this is being more specific to multicultural destinations. And so that was really a hot point. Again, parks and public spaces, things we've talked about tonight, and some of these are maybe not necessarily what Bureau would be doing with doing events, but the city, THPRD, private groups that might do events and supporting those in various ways are a good way of driving folks like the night market to downtown. Construction disruption assistance, we started to work on that because of the Beaverton High School project is happening. Their project is happening. Projects that we have done with the Reeser and the garage, we recognize in the downtown when there's construction, there's disruption to businesses and from either parking or just the construction work that's happening near businesses and places of residencies. So those are trying to give you a little snapshot. I'll stop sharing, but it's definitely an area that we are really, really interested in making sure that we spend some time implementing it, and we expect it to be threaded throughout all these projects and programs.
Thank you for that, because I just had some questions where the money was spending with DES. So clear my questions. I agree with Director Tiflon and Hassan that I would love to see this annually, just quick recap how much money that we're spending and what's being worked on. And especially the signage identity making, where I don't know when we're going to have that question as a council, or maybe we can ask one of the boards or PURAC board to think about it. Where I think it's about time that we should discuss about the signage and identity of downtown. We've been talking about it for many years, but we haven't really done deeper thinking. I have my own ideas. I want it like downtown Beaverton to be like international food destination, but I think it's about time we should talk about it, so we don't just put the money aside, but we are not doing anything. But I think it's really needed for the Beaverton to be thriving economically. And last thing I want to mention is the First Street Dining Commons. I was a little hesitant because the council hasn't decided on what we're going to do with it yet. But if it shows up at the Bureau document, it might give wrong impression to the community that the dining commons, we're going to go ahead and start investing money on the dining commons. So I'm not for or against, because we haven't had discussion in a council level, and that hasn't formally adopted at a Bureau level yet, but it's on the document. So maybe change that to maybe like community identity, some sort, whatever that you can. But I am uncomfortable designating funding for First Street Dining Commons just because we haven't gone through the procedure yet. I don't know what your thoughts are. I don't know what word you're going to replace with, but that's my thoughts. And if I wear a counselor hat, I'm actually more worried about community center in a sense that because we are losing our community center, and that served as a winter severe weather center, but it's going to be demolished in end of this year when we are building senior housing. So we don't have a place where if there's an emergency, we don't have a place where we're going to put the people. So that's my counselor hat. So I don't know what you're all thinking, but I'd rather not designate it with the First Street Dining Commons, but something else. We might also come back when we decide from a council and Bureau that we're going to invest money in it, and that's all fine. But I think it's too early to designate it and name it. So that's my comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Director Kimmy. All right. So my thoughts, the creek, hold on. I have so many tabs open now because Janine, I had to go check the plan about the wayfinding. So maybe let me talk about wayfinding since I have that on the page. Okay, so Janine, you know your stuff. It is on page 16. There are some really specific requirements for us that we have to kind of meet because of that plan. So we may, as a group, not be as excited at the opportunity, right? Like there's some things that we just have to do in there, and it's not like a blue sky ideation necessarily because it's part of this big plan. So just something for us to remind ourselves in. I think Counselor Tivnon is the one who also probably knows this plan as well as Janine. I definitely like it makes me want to refresh, right? Because as we are sitting here as Bureau board members, we need to make sure that we're helping execute on that plan. But I am very concerned to see so little in the line item for signage and for the creek side stuff. I don't know how 100K is going to make a difference in the creek side work. It's just that I really don't know how that makes an impact at all. One of my, I'm going to be kind of all over, so sorry. One of my biggest priorities as an elected official is affordable housing, but I also see this line item that shows 300K for 4 of the 5 years, and that I don't know what we would be using 300K for because that also will not make an impact. We know it's going to be a significant cost. So I would love to hear a little bit more about what we think that 300K would be used for in affordable housing, or if it might be better used in the line item like the creek plan or something like that. So that's just my feedback, and I'm not trying to go back around on the board to get consensus or anything. That was just kind of my reaction to it.
Yeah, I'll try to respond and we can go from there. As far as the affordable housing, we have placed hundreds of thousands of dollars typically in the affordable housing category over the years for various reasons. One is, we've talked about the buy down option. We've talked about helping with the mobile home park homes that may need some assistance. We can do various things with that. Sometimes it's due diligence for pre-development for projects, and that's kind of an important piece to any type of development in which we know that $1 million+ is kind of the norm to do pre-development before you actually start construction. And the senior housing on Fifth, which is outside of the urban renewal district, we have some targeted funds to help them with their pre-development cost, and not with Bureau money, but general fund, Metro Housing Bond funds, those types of assistant programs. And so there's different tools that 300,000. At one point, we were thinking that we could kind of carry that forward, right? And if we don't spend 300,000 this coming year, we may spend 600,000 because we can do some buy down of 10 units over 10 to 15 years. Yeah, so there's different ways that we can look at that, and that's my kind of response to your $200,000 question. Creeks, there's different things that I was thinking about as we've talked about tonight. It's a reminder that BERA is not necessarily all of our funds going in as we are the project and our project money. We help other projects. Yeah, there's the delta that is necessary for maybe Clean Water Service has a project coming up, and we can help them with a creek project. Walton Hills Park and Recreation District, they may be interested in doing something along the creek in some fashion. So we can assist. Having an opportunity to go after a Metro grant, and this is our assistance to go after a larger grant opportunity, similar to the loop money, and we're hoping to be able to do with the Bureau backing and leveraging that dollar towards bigger numbers from somewhere else. And the signage, yeah, I think we've heard that pretty clear tonight. some of the desires on the community identity and the wayfinding that's currently downtown. That was through a Washington County Visitor Association grant, and that was I think it was like a $50,000 grant, something to that effect. And the signs that you see downtown was based off of that grant. There was no city funds, there was no Vera funds, yeah, they probably need to be refreshed. And there's probably more that we can do and assist with. And so we'll take that all into consideration tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Did I capture everything?
Yeah, you did. That was great. I think for me, and I think some of my fellow board members kind of asked questions about, seeing spikes in certain years. In some years, we do anticipate a project coming in that year, and that's why we've maybe done it. But in others, we don't really know, and it's kind of placeholder. And I think I would rather see than kind of like an even approach to the funding of that line item, especially knowing that we have the opportunity to kind of roll over into the next year and, and kind of grow the bucket if needed, like your example in the affordable housing. So I think that knowing that like we're not the driver of some of the projects, we're meant to kind of help, kind of be a contributor. I think that makes sense why I'm seeing lower, numbers in some of these. And then I think that for First Street Dining Commons, with that clarification that this is really more towards looking at that kind of permanent, more construction lens, I feel comfortable with this and the amount there. It is something that I think there was a lot of consensus around that, like, we don't want to keep, kind of spending money on this temporary thing. We'd like to figure out what is our permanent solution. And I think to me, like some permanent structure is going to become part of that. And I also kind of see this as being part of a project and probably not enough to pay for the whole thing, right? So I think it's important for us to say, like, the work that we have done to build an urban renewal area that, has grown economically to get that tax increment, right, to repay the districts. We also have to continue to invest in our investment to help make it, have longevity and stick around. So I think I see First Street Dining Commons as kind of a permanent investment in investments that we've already made in building the district. So those are my comments. Elaine, I know we only looked at your questions at the top, but did you and Nick and Tyler get the feedback that you were needing from this group?
Thank you. And I just re-looked at those questions while you were talking, and I think in summary, what I've heard is a lot of input that people, and we've heard this throughout, are really interested in funding more community identity now. And so for us to figure out how that can be done within the constraints of the plan and the category distributions that we have for the plan. So I think that's something for us as a consultant and staff team to go back and look at and see what we can respond to on that. So that's the biggest question that I've heard. There's a lot of other general questions. I think making sure that when we actually produce the 5-year action plan, that it has that overarching information about the 3 plans that are looked at, the equity plan, the urban renewal plan, the your acquisition development portfolio strategy, making sure that that's clear in your 5-year action plan as those guiding plans to go from. So I think that I have the answers, and Nick, I don't know if you have any input there, or Tyler.
It looks like Councilor Duggar has requested to speak again, maybe here, if I see that right. I would just like to say that I definitely think you guys answered the questions we had on the screen tonight, and I continue to be impressed working with this group at just how functional this is. This is a lot of difficult information we gave you. 5 years of planned expenditures with 24 different line items with specific dollar amounts, trying to balance multiple buckets and multiple objectives. And every one of you had a chance to give us your comments tonight and ask questions, and they were very well thought out. Great feedback for us to take action on. So I really appreciate working with this group.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Elaine. Okay, Director Duggar.
I'll be really quick. The other thing, Elaine, I wanted to say was, and it just came to me, and I apologize, but I think there's an opportunity for us to use wayfinding, not as just like, hey, this is Old Town, or hey, this is New Town, or whatever we call the round area, right? But like directing people specifically so we utilize our existing things like our parking infrastructure better, right? Because I often see, like right around the First Street, Second Street area, it's always difficult for parking. But if you go up near the farmers market lot, and I always tell people go there, right? There's tons of parking there. But there's no signs to direct it. There's no smart parking technology and things that we could, I hate the two birds, one stone analogy, but are there ways we can use both wayfinding and smart technologies in that kind of application to help solve other problems too? So just thinking about that too. I'm going to shut up though. It's really late here, so
That's a
that
great
kind of idea too. Yeah.
Thank you. I think it fits with the theme of Bureau having such catalytic impact, right? That we can be catalytic with our own investments in ourselves too. So thank you. Okay. Thank you, Elaine and Nick, for joining us. The next agenda item we have is the Executive Director's report. So will the Executive Director have anything to share with us this evening?
Yes, Chair, I've got a few things, I think mainly updates, and I'll try and keep it brief because I think we're all probably ready to be done, but wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping at the top. Well, before I do that, I guess I want to thank Paige and Yurek for the presentation. She looks like she might, oh, she's still on, so just really appreciate the thoroughness and seeing pictures, right? Seeing like what they've been up to is really, really cool to see. And just want to thank Elaine, Nick, and Ali for their help on the 5-year action plan. I know it's been a lot of iterations of coming forward and a lot of work to get to this point. Housekeeping side, I'm starting to think about our meetings and what times are available as we get into budget and into then the summer, which feels like it's around the corner, right? It's like 30 degrees outside. Our next scheduled meeting is actually March 12th, which is literally, I think, the deadline to submit materials for that for staff is today. And so not much of a turnaround, and I'm not sure that we have a huge amount of things that we can really feasibly put on that agenda. What we're looking at after that is a scheduled meeting on the 23rd of April. And then in May, we have budget committee meetings. And so we've tried to remove the Bureau meeting from that timeframe. June 4th, we'll do a Bureau budget approval. There's the possibility of a business meeting. I think we would normally do that June 25th. And so just kind of teasing that out from the timing standpoint, I don't want it to appear as though we don't have business in Bureau. I know there's a lot happening in council, and we just talked about a lot potentially happening with the 5-year action plan that we would start to implement things, and we want to be able to bring discussion items forward around program income or around hopeful tenants maybe in the garage space or property acquisition or whatever is going to come forward. And so we want to make sure we've got some times set out before we look at July and August, when I think we're going to try to take a bit of a break from some of our public meeting schedule. So just saying that out loud, that we might skip the March meeting given the timing for us to be able to get things agendized, but then we'd look at an April and then a June. I'm going to put that out there for folks, the idea of a June 25th full meeting. Along with a really brief budget touch on the 4th. That the 4th is literally just to approve the Bureau budget. So anyway, I think it's important that we have a couple options for business. Other items aside from housekeeping, just wanted to mention a couple projects and project updates. In the Bureau area, or in Bureau adjacent, as we might call it. Maybe that's one of our new neighborhood names. But the idea of what's happening in Madera and Madera Beaverton, Madera Raleigh, Madera Beaverton, construction is ongoing. That's Fifth and Western and Broadway area. So we're seeing construction, seeing things go up. We are seeing things come down in the high school area. So the demolition of the Merle Davies building is occurring now, and we're seeing construction planned for spring. So a lot happening in the high school, the Beaverton High School area. We're also looking at, I'm sure you're well aware of some of the 217 construction and the closures around that, around Hall Boulevard and 217. That'll be closed beginning March 4th, and it's predicted to be a 9-month closure. So probably some impacts on circulation and potentially traffic. The Willamette Water Supply Program, WWSP, is coming forward, continuing to come forward with completion hopeful in 2026. I think still on track for that. And so there's been construction activity on Beaverton Hillsdale Highway and Western Avenue associated with the implementation of that, putting large pipe into the ground for water conveyance. And then finally, just want to mention the consent agenda item for Lombard West. Obviously, that helps to move that project forward by funding some of the pre-development work. And we're hopeful that that will come forward quickly with the preparation of the staff work side of the development solicitation that we'd like to get out here shortly, which could be one of our agenda items in the future. And I will stop talking as I see a hand up and respond to questions.
Not a question. Just maybe everyone else knew this. When I saw that Hall Boulevard is going to be closed for 9 months, I flipped out a little bit until I researched it, and it is not the overpass that many of us take that connects Hall Boulevard on one side of the 217 to the other side where you've got the grocery outlet and Red Tail and Embassy Suites. It's an overpass that's further down 217 to the south, does not impact us hardly at all for folks that are commuting mostly within the city and just the fringe around it.
Yeah, I think a to and from, not a circulation in the city.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Dan, I see Councillor Teeter would like to ask a question, but did you did you get to finish your?
I'm done.
Okay, just making sure. All right, cool. Councillor Teeter.
Okay. So we were talking about the March date of March 12th, 2 weeks away. We usually meet on the 4th Tuesday of the month, right?
We do.
So I do have the bureau hold for the 12th, but is there a reason why we weren't meeting on the 26th of March?
There is, and I'm blanking on exactly why that was. And Tyler said
spring break.
Spring break.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
That's right. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, there's reasons.
Yeah. No.
It's
Yeah.
important.
We negotiated to try to make sure we did not get March lost, but 2 weeks after a big meeting, and as Dan noted, it will likely be canceled that March 12th. I think we can hold off on a couple things that we were thinking of bringing forward. Just they're not necessary. So at this point, March 12th would be canceled.
Okay. Okay, that sounds good. I'm okay with the schedule changes if it helps y'all get the work done and stay on track.
Okay. Are there any other questions for Dan or Tyler?
I have one.
Okay.
Yeah, regards to the staff needs 2 weeks. They have to submit the work 2 weeks before our meeting.
At least, yes. There's some review period that occurs behind the scenes for agenda bills and things like that. And there's processing, making sure that the staff and the recorder's office have enough time to gather all the materials and make sure that the packet's ready to be distributed.
Okay, so it's not like law, right? Or is it just our policy?
It's policy. Yeah, I think it's just trying to make sure we have the best product for y'all to review.
So then, do you think it's okay for the staff? Because I heard some other times where it was such a there's things happening quickly, and then when we have a meeting or council meeting or bureau meeting, we need to talk about it, but it's inconvenient. I heard some place where it was kind of inconvenient for staff to prep. So I was just wondering, what's the best way, or is this the best way that we are doing the city business?
I'll give my opinion, I guess, and maybe Jenny has an opinion as well. But I think, we do the best business when it's planful, and we provide enough time for staff and for you all as decision makers in whatever the public meeting is to make that determination by having time to review information and time to think, and then having a staff presentation that's thoughtful. So we try to look ahead, hence the idea of looking at our calendars a few months out, and thinking about when we might program work. But yeah, there are emergencies that come up, and we work within whatever parameters we have to work through those. So something like the ice event or something where there's an actual emergency and we need to take action, we put steps in place so that we can take action, and then also approve that later on if we had to do something that wasn't we didn't have time to get in front of the governing body or that kind of thing. So I think in general we try to make sure that there's enough time for staff to do their work, for the work of gathering all the information together and making sure it's thoughtfully reviewed, and there aren't mistakes that we have to then do more work, and then we bring it forward for consideration.
Okay, I just wanted to help our staff and make it more efficient. That was the question. Thank you.
Absolutely, I appreciate that.
Okay. I am not seeing any other names in the chat, so without further ado, we are adjourned, and we will likely see each other in April.